Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Laprie.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. This is episode 37, and I'm your host, Kim Laprie. This is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. So I want to tell you guys that it is December 24th at the time of this release, and happy holidays. Just want to start out with that. And I'm really grateful for you guys, for all of you who are listening, who are subscribing, who are reaching out to me. I can't tell you enough how much that in and of itself means to me. I kind of feel like I'm just this, regular teacher in one corner of the country doing my best to have a positive impact on students and on other teachers. And to hear from my listeners across the country, really, it means so much to me. So thank you guys for all of your support, and especially for those of you who've taken the time to leave me feedback in Apple Podcasts and also email me. So I don't know if you guys remember that I'm asking people to actually leave me some voicemails, just sort of telling me some of your favorite things about teaching. And I got one, and I love it. I am so excited. And it's from Joshua Espinoza, and he is in Montana. And I wanted to share what he had to say about why he loves teaching.
Hey, Kim. My name is Joshua Espinoza. I live in Kalispell, Montana, and I'm substitute teaching while I'm working on my bachelor's in elementary education. I love surprising answers that students come up with. They have some really great ideas, and it's nice and even refreshing to hear those. And it brings about the challenge of asking, how can I support that student's idea, which is also fun. As I substitute, I teach from kindergarten to 12th grade in pretty much any subject. I've been a PE teacher for kindergarten and an honors English teacher for high school. But I'm grateful for the support, like the supported opportunities that I'm given as a substitute. My substitute position it's given the opportunity to work in education, the chance to get my feet wet, but the schools also give me support. They provide space, sub-plans, the contacts I need, and the schedule. And I even get some follow-up after the day on they ask what they could do better. So it really feels like a goal-oriented relationship, which is nice. I don't have any memorable presents, but I did get a thank you note from a first grader one time that made me laugh. At the top, he wrote out, "Thank you," but it was spelled FAC space YOU. It made me laugh, but he's a sweetheart. So, and for next year, for my university classes, I'm trying out the Rocket book. So I'm excited to see if it works. I've been trying to find a nice note-taking style that would work for me. And so I've paired the Rocket book with my Google Drive to stay organized. And my goal for next semester is to become a writing tutor. I think gaining more experience in that will really help me develop my feedback, like the quality of my feedback that I can give later in my teaching career. I'm a little lost in how to start that. I think I'll ask the principals and some of my supports how I can do that, but that is my goal. And I do have one tip for December that I'm actually trying this year, and it applies well to the circumstances here in Montana since we do get some good snow. I'm changing my view of winter from cold to cozy. So instead of hating that I have to go out and shovel and scrape ice, I'm going to think about how I can bundle up next to a fire with some hot chocolate. It has nothing really to do with school. It's just winter talk. Thanks. Bye.
I really loved this message. So thank you, Joshua, for leaving that. And some things that you mentioned that really stuck out to me. First of all, I think it's really great that you have such a positive outlook on substitute teaching. A lot of teachers, they have such terrible substitute teaching experiences, and maybe you do as well, and you're just sort of reframing it so it's not just sort of this hellhole that you have to get through so that you can get your feet wet into teaching. You're really embracing it, and I think that that's going to really help you become more successful when you have your own classroom in the near future. I also really liked your goal with using the Rocket Journal. I've actually seen those, and they look fascinating to me. So I'd love to hear back from you in terms of how that's going, because I've heard things like, if you put it in the sunlight, everything gets erased, or the idea of putting a notebook in the microwave is scary and enticing at the same time. Because I think that's like one of the ways you can erase everything. I don't know. I think so. So I'd love to get your take on how much that has helped. And then I liked that you wanted to do tutoring so you can improve the quality of your feedback. That's awesome, because feedback is the single most important factor in your students growing. Because if they just keep making the same mistakes without quality feedback from you, then they're not going to improve. So I loved that. And finally, did you guys hear what he said at the end about also reframing that Montana is cold? And I'm sure Montana is freezing. I'm a cold wimp because I live here in Southern California, but I can't even fathom how cold that is. But in any case, instead of thinking of it as like freezing cold, you're thinking of it as cozy. And who doesn't love the idea of putting on their sweater or their pajamas and, really warm socks and sitting in front of a fireplace? I mean, that's so idyllic. It's just awesome. So thank you so much, Joshua, for sharing your positive message. And my stickers are supposed to come on Monday. Guys, I got stickers. I got Teachers Need Teachers podcast stickers that I'm going to be sending to my listeners who leave the voicemail with why they love teaching. So even if you're a substitute teacher or a student teacher or barely a first year teacher, you're just going to start next semester, leave some voicemail feedback. I'd love to feature you on the podcast and send you an awesome sticker.
Hey y'all, I'm Casey Bell of the Google Teacher Tribe podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com and get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Now, if you guys listened to last week's episode, I had Angela Watson on here, and we talked about getting more done in less time, taking your time back so that you're not spending an exorbitant amount of time outside of school getting things done. And we talked about the 40-hour teacher work week, which I was part of a few years ago, and it absolutely changed my teaching. And I just wanted to remind you guys that if you sign up by December 31st, then you get a huge discount. You get an early bird discount compared to if you wait until January. And the cohort does start in January as well. So if you join now, then you have some time to leisurely look at the materials for January, and you can sort of get a head start and wrap your brain around the first month's topic. So if you head over there to, it's 40htw.com. That stands for 40-hour teacher work week, as if work week was one word. And you sign up there. She also has, one-time payment for the early bird, but she also has a payment plan to make it easier on your wallet. And then just be sure to mention who sent you, Kim Lepre, or you can also put my email, kim@teachersneedteachers.com. So I was going to wait because there's some ambient noise from some dogs singing Christmas carols and communicating with each other, but I think you guys aren't going to mind if you can hear it. Dogs are going to do what they're going to do. So anyway, today's episode came from a couple of things. Number one, I received an email from Michael Gallimore. I hope I said your name right, Michael. And he was asking me about advice in terms of student teaching, because he is going to be starting student teaching soon. And on Twitter, Cindy Luhovian who's someone that I follow, and she follows me on Twitter. She had seen a thread from Tatiana DeWitt, who is about to start her student teaching. And so I thought, well, this is a sign that I need to do an episode on student teaching. And I was thinking, well, Kim, is this really a good time to do this? Because we're about to go on break in the holidays. And I thought, you know what? Some of you are driving long distances to get to your family. And some of you have extra time. Some of you might just be discovering this podcast for the first time. So actually, this is a perfect time to talk about preparing for student teaching, especially if you're going to be starting in January. So I got my best tips. I also looked at some of the tips that people gave when responding to Tatiana's tweet. And so here are the categories. I feel like this is Jeopardy. Here are the categories. Number 1, getting to know students, and then getting to know the staff, classroom management, planning, and your master teacher. I don't know if you guys call it something else depending on your teaching program. It might not be master teacher, it might be cooperating teacher. I don't know any other names for that, but in any case, here we go. So let's start with getting to know your students, okay? So first of all, you want to really think about day 1 with those students. Now, this is assuming that you are going to be communicating with your master teacher ahead of time, but you definitely want to have day 1 planned out because it's really important. And you're really only going to get one chance to make a good first impression. Now realize also that these students are going to behave for you similar to the way that they would behave for their master teacher. Well, their teacher. It's your master teacher. It's their regular teacher. So if your master teacher already has, established some good classroom management, then they're going to behave for you naturally because they don't want to disappoint their teacher. And if it's not that case, they're going to give you the exact same treatment. They're not going to treat you any better just because you're a guest. So just be prepared to make a good first impression on that first day. Also, you want to make a point to learn every student's name by the end of the first week. And I know that's tough, but chances are, even if you're in secondary, you have maybe 30 to 60 students. Maybe you're only teaching 1 to 2 classes. And if you're in elementary, I'm hoping you don't have more than 30 students. So make a point, get a copy of the seating chart. And if you can take a picture of them and, knowing that it's going to be confidential, just so that you could have the picture and put their name on it and you can learn their names right away. Because you need to fast track it. Usually for those of us in the classroom already, it might take us a couple weeks, but you have 1 semester with them, so you have to fast track this process, okay? So make sure that you learn it, because you're not just teaching a class, you're teaching a group of individuals. So you want to know them as individuals. And you really want to work hard in the beginning to create a good rapport with them without trying to be their friend. This can be hard, especially because you're probably young. Maybe not, but a lot of student teachers are young. And especially if you're teaching high school or middle school, it's hard for those students to see you as authority. It's hard for them to see you as a teacher. So you're going to have to try to find that balance between getting to know them and being friendly and not being their friend. They might ask if they can follow you on social media. I really wouldn't do that or recommend that as a student teacher, only because we're talking about some blurry lines here. So you don't want them to see you going out for margaritas on Friday during happy hour. I just think that you have to really try to get this sense that, or give the sense that you're the teacher, you're in charge, and let's just avoid that for now. I know that some teachers do that later on, but as a student teacher, let's just wait on that, okay? And so let's go back to this. So we're focusing on building relationships, and something that someone had told me, and I totally forgot this, be prepared for all of the questions students will ask you, whether or not they're appropriate. And that, of course, that cracked me up because they still do that. The thing is, because you are younger, maybe, possibly, probably, they're genuinely curious about your life. They want to know if you're dating anyone, if you're married, if you have any kids, what you like to do, what kind of car you drive, all kinds of stuff. they're just genuinely curious. And also they want to see how far they can get with those types of questions. So, it's okay to share and let them get to know you without revealing too much. They like it when you're real. If they feel like you're human and you're not going to, act with this air of authority and be fake about that, then they will respond to you better. So get to know them, let them start to get to know you. And I would even sort of like drip out this information. Don't tell them everything all at once. Make it, maybe like a Friday thing where you share a little bit about you and then they share a little bit about themselves or something like that, so that you can have this ongoing conversation and there's sort of this anticipation in terms of getting to know you. Okay. So that's in terms of getting to know the students. All right. Next, getting to know the staff. This one is very important. Okay. So not only do you want to be talking with your master teacher, you want to also be talking to the teachers around you, the teachers in the classroom next to you, across the hall, definitely the teachers that are in the same grade level or that teach the same subject as you. They've all been there. It's not just your master teacher. All of those teachers in there have been there, and you want to be able to lean on their expertise. You want to be able to also get their information, get their recommendations, and just get as much as you can from everyone around you, especially if it's a beginning teacher, because they can give you some insight too on what to expect, especially if you end up teaching at that school someday. And also, I know it's hard with student teaching and you're probably still balancing some college classes. You want to be involved in school. So we're talking about going to clubs and see if you can go to staff meetings as well, so you can sort of get a feel for the dynamic with all the staff. So a lot of times there's politics involved, even though we hate to admit that. And you also want to attend any school events. That's really important. Every school event, even if it's a band concert in the evening, chances are you have students who are in band and you want to show that you support them. And if there's a club that you could join or start, if you hear students saying, hey, we love anime, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll start an anime club, find out if you can do that. The more involved you are, the better experience you're going to have, because you're going to be building those relationships with those students and you're really going to be solidifying them. You're going to connect with students even more. Also, if you have a chance to, if you have time, go and observe other teachers. I know you're probably tired of observations at this point, but especially if they're in your same grade level or they are teaching the same subject, go see how other teachers are teaching that same material. And don't just focus on being around your master teacher the whole time. That's something that I wasn't able to do when I was student teaching, because I started out as a band teacher. And so there's only one band teacher at that site. And between college classes, I didn't have time to also go to another school and show up and say, hey, can I observe you? So if you teach like elementary school, or if you teach like math, 6th grade math, 7th grade math, go and see how the other teachers are teaching, what their classroom management is like, all of that stuff. Also, now this is really important. Introduce yourself to the office and custodial staff and befriend them immediately. And actually, this is a good practice every time you start a new school. Now, these people, the front office staff, the custodial staff, they will save and support you in more ways than you can imagine. You want to be their best friend, and you want to learn now how to build those relationships with support staff. So the principal secretary will always be super duper helpful. They will answer your billions of questions. And I would, sort of balance too, like asking your master teacher some questions and then asking the principal secretary questions about, how things run. Say you're going to go to a conference. What are the procedures? Do you have to fill a leave of absence form? And then the custodial staff, if you're nice to them, and then there's like a spill in the room or something's going on in your classroom, they're more likely to help you quickly if you've established a good rapport with them. I mean, I know it's their job, but they're a lot less begrudging if you respect them and you are friendly towards them. All right, so that's getting to know the staff. And there's more that I could talk about on this topic, but I don't want to overwhelm you guys on this. And I'm also going to be putting all of these tips in the show notes and on the website, my podcast website, teachersneedteachers.com/37. All right. Next one is a biggie. Classroom management. Yes. So here we go. First of all, when you're thinking about how you want to run your classroom, regardless of whether it's student teaching or when you're in your own classroom, you want to simplify your classroom expectations and only have a few rules. You don't want to prattle on a whole list of don'ts. The kids aren't going to remember that. You want to pick some all-encompassing rules that relate to being good human beings rather than don't do this and don't do that. It makes it easier to enforce too. So if we're talking about, don't hit someone, don't spit, don't get out of your seat without asking. Those could all be respect others and yourself, respect the classroom, respect people's property. Okay. So that's a lot simpler because then when they do get up to get a tissue or go to the bathroom without asking, you're saying you're not respecting the classroom and you're not respecting me. That's really easy. A lot of different behaviors can fall under respect the teacher, respect yourself, and respect others, right? Also, be willing to use the authority that you're given to create a positive learning environment. You may feel a little bit weird with the master teacher there. Sometimes they are in the room with you, and it might feel awkward just because they're there and you're reprimanding a student maybe, and they're there and that's their student. But you're given the keys to the castle for that particular class or that particular period. You need to be the teacher and not the teacher's assistant at that point. So use it to cultivate that positive learning environment that everyone wants to have. But also, you want to learn and use your master teacher's routines and procedures. Now, here's why. Because if you break too far from the way that that teacher does it, then you could get some pushback. So you want to figure out how to incorporate your own way of teaching while also testing out their way of running the classroom. I mean, at this point, you don't really have a frame of reference anyway. It's your student teaching. This is the first time when you're going to have the kids all to yourself. So try out what they are doing. And if you don't like it, then don't do it when you have your own classroom. But try it out while you're there. Plus, you don't want to run into a situation where students are saying, well, Mr. White tells us that we can do that. And then now you're not only going against the master teacher's authority that they had previously established, now you have to try to save face when they say that. And that's never pleasant. I actually ran into that when I was student teaching. So if there are rules that the master teacher has established, like they can't chew gum and you don't have a problem with gum, just don't let them chew gum while you're there. It's not a big deal. Maybe when you have your own, then you'll decide, yeah, kids can chew gum. I don't care if there's gum on the bottom of every single desk and seat. So definitely incorporate their classroom procedures and classroom management with your own flair. Okay. And also realize that classroom management will be the bane of your existence your first few years of teaching. So try to glean whatever you can, either from your master teacher or other teachers that you observe. This means record how they handle discipline issues. Like actually write down when you're watching them, what did they do? What did they say? Ask them for copies of any types of forms that they fill out, even if it's electronic, if they could screenshot it and send it to you. Ask them later, why did you do that? So if they pulled them aside, if they had them sit in a timeout space, whatever it is that they do for discipline, ask them why they chose that form of discipline, why that consequence. And that's really important because it might not make sense to you or it might not be something that you want to do, but if they explain the rationale, that could actually be something that you could put in your tool belt someday when you're trying to figure out your own classroom management. So you want to say in a way where you're not challenging their authority, like, why'd you do that? Be like, I'd love to understand the purpose of that timeout chair in the corner. How has it worked for you? Why did you choose that particular way in terms of a consequence, just ask them without sounding like you're skeptical of it or you don't like it. You just want to know the rationale behind their decisions. All right, moving on to planning. When it comes to planning, you have to ask for help. Definitely ask for help and input. Now, it's going to be different for every single master teacher. So for me, I was able to steal all of their lesson plans, and they let me keep all of them. One of my colleagues, David, who I work with right now, when he was student teaching, his master teacher didn't let him have anything. He couldn't use anything that was pre-planned, and he had to make everything from scratch. The rationale of the master teacher was that he needed to learn how to create materials, and he needed to learn how to plan his own lessons and see if they worked out. There's no right way necessarily for student teaching, but ask for input either way. So even if you take their lesson and you're going to teach it the next day, ask them, why did you add this particular part of the lesson? Why are you using this worksheet? Okay, or how did you teach this? Did you go over it with the class? Did you have them do it in groups or by themselves? Ask a lot of questions for the planning part so that you can sort of get into that master teacher's brain and know why they plan the way that they plan. Also, this can be hard, but you want to try to plan as far in advance as possible. But you also want to be ready to pivot when necessary if things aren't going right. So you need to be flexible, which will save you a lot of headache and anxiety if the lesson isn't quite going how you want it to be. And you're going to have to accept that not all lessons are going to be successful. And it's fine. It's, even for those of us who've been teaching a while, when we're trying something new, it doesn't necessarily go right. I can tell you the first time that I used Flipgrid, it was a fiasco, and we all laughed it off, and it kind of felt like a waste of a period because we didn't accomplish what we were supposed to. But it was a learning experience for all of us, and later on, when we did use Flipgrid again, it worked out even better. And again, we were able to chuckle about it, like, remember when we tried this out and it was the biggest fail ever? So, just be human and admit when you make a mistake and laugh it off with your students and say, okay, you guys, that didn't work out. We're going to try that again tomorrow. And they'll say, oh, that's okay, Miss Laprie, we understand. So being human and being real will go a long, long way. Now, when you're planning also, especially if you're a one-to-one school, meaning that every student has some form of technology or device, you want to always have some paper copies on hand in case they don't bring it, it's not charged. And you also want to have a plan B if the Wi-Fi goes down. Ask your master teacher about that. What is their way of handling it if there's a student who isn't prepared, doesn't have their iPad or laptop, or if the Wi-Fi all of a sudden goes down? Because I will tell you, it's going to happen. And if you get flustered and upset while that's happening, then things are going to fall apart in the classroom. You're going to lose their respect. You definitely don't want to lose your cool, and you just want to be like, all right, so we don't have Wi-Fi. Here's what we're going to do instead. Okay, so just be prepared. So in terms of when you're actually delivering the lesson, if you're talking about a concept and students are just staring at you with blank looks, not bored necessarily, or maybe even bored, but they're just staring at you with blank looks like, I don't get it. I don't know what you're talking about. Have them do a quick think, pair, share. And during that think, pair, share, ask them to teach what you just discussed, but in their own words. And then use some sort of random calling system to have students repeat back. Now, if they can't, then you need to try to explain it again and say, okay, I'm going to tell you guys this again, but this time I really want you to listen, and we're going to do the think, pair, share again, and I'm going to call on a different person. And then you're going to get them to really actively listen so that they can be prepared. And another thing that I like to do is, if I call on partner A, I'm not going to say, okay, can you tell me what you said? I'm going to say, partner A, tell me what partner B said. So sometimes that throws them off because they're like, oh, wait, I wasn't really listening. I wasn't being an active listener. And the next time they think pair share, they're going to be more attentive. So then sometimes I'll warn them, you never know if I'm going to ask for what you said or what your partner said. So make sure that you're being a good listener. So that's just a little tip with that. And finally, let's talk about your master teacher. Now, I have heard all ends of the spectrum in terms of great master teachers and terrible master teachers who just take off and leave you to do everything. I can't predict what you're going to get. You can't predict what you're going to get unless you talk to someone whose student taught with them, honestly. So not every teacher wants to take a student teacher. So you might just kind of end up with what you can get. And that's just the truth. So here are some tips for that, okay? First of all, go in with an open mind when working with that person. Like I said, you don't know who you're going to get and what it's going to be like, but just think of it as an adventure rather than, am I going to like this person or am I not going to like this person? You know what? That's completely irrelevant. What matters is, can they teach? Can I learn something from them? And that's it. They are loaning you their students for a semester. That's really hard for a lot of us because we love our students. We've connected with them. We have certain things that we want and need to teach. And if we pass them off to you, those kids might not learn what we need and want them to learn. So come in just knowing that you're given this awesome opportunity and don't take it for granted and don't, begrudge it because you don't like your master teacher. Okay. So just keep an open mind and just think of it as a working relationship. You might love them. You might have an amazing experience with them, or you might not like them and you like everybody else in the school but them. It doesn't matter. You have to work with them and just make the most out of it. Okay. And one more thing about this, if you don't like or get along with your master teacher, just try to find some common ground and avoid any confrontation, because they are doing you a huge service by letting you be in the classroom. And another thing is they can also serve as a reference later on. You need that reference for when you're interviewing for a job. I mean, yes, you'll get the faculty at the school where you're getting your credential, but you also want a letter of reference from that master teacher. And it would also be good to get some other teachers or the principal or another administrator to observe you teaching as well so that you can get letters of reference from them. Those will be really helpful when you're applying for a job later on. So try not to get on your master teacher's bad side because future principals are really going to look at that letter of recommendation or lack thereof. They might ask you, how come you don't have one from your master teacher? And if you just couldn't, suck it up and learn how to work with them, then that's not going to look very good for you. Some newer teachers that I've spoken to have told me that they didn't really agree with the way that their master teacher ran the classroom or their classroom management or the way that they taught. But what's key is that they did absorb everything and they took notes, and I'll talk more about that. But they did absorb everything because they knew that later on in their career, they might actually end up adopting some of those policies and procedures. The teacher that you are when you're student teaching is so vastly different 10 or 15 years into your career. And I'm sure that seems obvious, but things that didn't fly when you started out, you're going to realize it's really not that big of a deal later on, and it's just going to be different. So don't take anything for granted. And another thing that I think is really important that I just mentioned is you want to keep some kind of a journal or take notes every day. And that might seem tedious, but you're going to look back on that later on. And that could also help with decisions in terms of how you want to run your classroom. And finally, this one is very, very important. Ask for feedback a lot. A lot. And when you do get feedback, if you don't like it, well, take it as an opportunity to improve. You need to expect some constructive criticism. You need to expect that your master teacher is going to find a bunch of holes in your teaching because you're still figuring it out. Think of it like if you're playing a sport and your coach is telling you that your form is wrong or you're doing something incorrectly. they're not doing it to be mean. They're saying it so that you can improve. Same thing with your master teacher. If they're constantly giving you praise, you need to have a talk with them and say, hey, I need you to tell me the things that I'm not doing right because I want to fix them before I get my own classroom. If you think I'm weak on classroom management, tell me. And also, please tell me how I can get better. So if classroom management is something that you are struggling with and you know this, get feedback from your master teacher. Ask another teacher who you think has really good classroom management to come and observe you, and definitely have the principal come in and have them give you advice on how to improve your classroom management. This really is the time to just stumble and fall, pick yourself up, stumble and fall, pick yourself up, because it's not your own classroom and you have so many people who are there to help you. Once you're teaching on your own and you have your own classroom, there's no one who's going to be there necessarily to tell you how to get better at that point on a daily basis. I mean, yes, you can have your mentor help you. If you have a mentor, they'll observe you and help you, maybe. And when your principal comes and sees you, that's going to be really tricky because now they're observing you to see if they want to keep you and give you tenure. So you don't want to wait until that point to get feedback from an administrator. So student teaching is the best time for all of that. Try to get as many people to observe you as possible. So I really hope that was helpful for you guys. And just to summarize, you want to focus on getting to know your students and the staff, classroom management, planning, and how to work best with your master teacher. And like I said, I'm going to put all of this in the show notes. So on whatever podcast player you're listening on, and also at teachersneedteachers.com/37. Couple of reminders before you go. Please don't leave yet. Okay. Number 1, don't forget to leave a voicemail for me with why you love teaching. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes with not only the Google Voice number that you can use, but also the questions that I asked. And those are the same questions that Joshua answered. And also, don't forget about the 40-hour Teacher Workweek. Even if you're just going into student teaching, or this is your first year of teaching, especially if this is your first year of teaching, you will get so much out of this because it will help you save time, focus on what really matters, and not go insane. And like I said, I can vouch for it. And something that I'm offering is if you do sign up, make sure that you mention my name when you sign up, and they'll let me know that you did that. And I will also offer you some additional help and mentoring as you go through the program. So I hope you have a great holiday, and I will talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.